hazardous for your health or not. So they write over here, I'm reading straight from the packet. This is what the doctors and this is what the government is telling us, that a person gets altered senses while he uses it. He loses track of time. He has changes in his mood. He cannot use his body as he usually does. He has impaired body movement. He has difficulty thinking and solving problems. He has a very, very impaired memory. And when taken on very high doses, it can lead to hallucinations, delusions, and even psychosis, which means borderline becoming crazy. Then they mention that when a person uses it when he's younger, it makes a tremendous effect on his brain development. That a person, they actually made a study, they quote a study that says that people who used it very heavily in their teens, between 13 and 38 years of age, they lost an average of 8 IQ points after they've been using marijuana for an extended amount of time. So seemingly short-term does affect. They do say that in the long term, it has, the person smokes it, the person has the same issues that smoking cigarettes would. In the sense that it damages your lungs, it irritates it, infections. It says that people have a hard time with pregnancy and child development when they're using it. People have intense nausea, and people have vomiting, and people have a lot of issues when they're trying to remove themselves from it. They're so connected to it, it has actually tremendous effects on their body after they stop using it. And even while during. So these are just the physical, and then they go on to list mental. They say there's a lot of mental effects it has. He says there are people who say they do have temporary hallucinations, paranoia, and it actually also leads to schizophrenia. It leads to a lot of people having voices in their head, and people think that there's somebody telling them to do something, and they're not 100% sure where it's coming from, and they feel like sometimes they're crazy and they're told to do things, and they have bizarre behavior due to the schizophrenia that marijuana could bring. So that's just, in a nutshell, what they write is the health problems and the health hazards that bring with marijuana, besides for the fact that after alcohol, it is known to be the most addictive drug there is out there, right? Besides for smoking cigarettes, tobacco, and alcohol, right up there is marijuana, so it's also very highly addictive, like we mentioned before. And many people know that in the world that it's a gateway drug, that it can, even if it's, you can look past all the health hazards it has itself, it will also be very easy to lead to more dangerous things and other things that are a tremendous health hazard. Not without goes out saying that a lot of times we hear stories of how people found marijuana laced with fentanyl. And if you go online and do research, in the past 2 years, in each of those 2 years, each year, 40,000 people died from fentanyl overdose. It came to be where it was a tremendous health alarm in the health world that it's becoming more and more of a common cause of death to have a fentanyl overdose, even though all you're smoking is marijuana, because they have a big incentive to mix fentanyl into the marijuana to give it a better high, to give it that mix, and to make it feel like it was very, very good stuff. So now that we read on paper what it says and that there are health hazards, we have to know, what does the Torah say? What are some Torah sources? So we know it's dangerous. So what if I say to myself, I don't care about the danger, I don't care about the health hazards? So in Sefer Dvarim, in Torah and Chumash, Sefer Dvarim, in the 4th chapter, in the 15th pasuk, it says, it says that we have to guard our health tremendously. And we have to make sure, not just to guard our health, me'od, very, very much so. And one of the very well-known poskim who wrote about marijuana specifically, we know was Rav Moshe Feinstein, alav shalom. He writes in Igrot Moshe, in the Yoredea Chelek Gimel Siman Lamed Hey, he writes over there many reasons why it would be asur. He says, first of all, is the health issue that we spoke about before. It destroys your body. He says it blocks, it impairs your ability to do mitzvot and to pray. So therefore, a person is unable to do mitzvot properly. He learns a very interesting isur. He learns from the sugya in Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin about Ben Soreh Moreh. You know, the Torah speaks about the wayward son, the son who rebels against his parents, and he goes and he gets an addiction to eating meat, drinking wine, to the point where he steals money from his parents. He doesn't listen to his parents, and if this happens multiple times, the Torah tells us that the parents take him to Bedin, take him to the grand court, and they kill him. And the Gemara says, better he should die innocent than he should die guilty. Meaning to say that we see from his addictive and gluttonous behavior that this will promote a lifestyle where will end up him becoming a sinner, end up him becoming a murderer. He will steal from his parents. He'll eventually steal from others to keep up with his lifestyle. And when you come to steal from others, you run the risk of becoming a murderer because people do not let you steal their money without putting up a fight. So therefore, Moshe Feinstein learns from here that if we see in the Torah that somebody who loses self-control, somebody who builds a desire, who builds an addiction to something, and he starts doing bad behavior, illegal things to justify and to support his desire, it's forbidden. The Torah says better he should die. So he says we learn from here that a person should learn it's a sur, it's forbidden to promote in himself addiction and promote himself a desire to the point where he can get a loss of self-control. And people who are addicted to marijuana, most definitely, they run the risk of losing self-control, and they run the risk of getting into the isur of following the way of the Ben Soreh Moreh. There is also an issue of kibud avim, lacking in honoring your parents. A person who's a youngster and his parents frown upon it. There's also a mitzvah d'oraita to follow one of the 10 commandments to respect your father and your mother. And the last thing Rav Moshe Feinstein writes about is Kiddushim Tiyu. He says that the Torah commands us to be holy. And the Ramban explains that this means that we have to, even though it's permitted, a person can have a tremendous amount of kosher wine, can have a tremendous amount of kosher meat. It doesn't mean that he's doing something permitted just because the food is kosher. A person still has to say, is this making me holy, or is this benefiting me? Am I doing this for a good reason, or am I doing it just to be a glutton, to be a person who overindulges? And a person who smokes marijuana, it's very easy to go off and to just do things for overindulgence. And that's not Kiddushim Tiyu. Very interestingly, in this past Aguda convention, the Rabbanim got up and spoke and said how marijuana is totally not allowed. Rav Zev Cohen from Chicago was a Rosh Kol, the Choshen Mishpat Kol there. He got up and said, B'Shem Rav Chaim Kanievsky, that he said that Rav Chaim said that marijuana is samamavet. That Rav Chaim said it is a poison. It is tremendously forbidden to get involved with this. There is a source. There is a video actually of the Rebbe Milubavitch actually getting asked, Allah Shalom, getting asked about what about smoking marijuana, if it's allowed, and he says it's totally not allowed, and he doesn't even know what's the question. He's shocked at the question. The Gemara says in Masechet Chulin and Daf Yud Amud Aleph, it says that Chamir Sakanta Mi'isura, that a person has to be more strict when it comes to physical danger than he is when it comes to prohibitions. If a person is meticulous to make sure not to transgress prohibitions, how much more so he has to make sure not to do things that are hazardous to his health. So therefore, a person has to know that this marijuana smoking or even eating or any way of consuming it involves a hazard. People want to know, what about if I sell it? I won't smoke it, but I'll sell it, or I'll run a company, I'll have a business where I sell it to other people, other Jews. We have to know that Shulchan Aruch writes in Yoredei Siman Kuf Nun Aleph, in 151, he writes, there is a prohibition in the Torah, Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol, do not put a stumbling block before the blind. So therefore, that means that you're not allowed to set someone else up for failure to do a sin. And if we're saying it's dangerous for your health, and Rav Moshe Feinstein gives 5 different reasons why it's not allowed, you selling it to somebody else or you giving it to somebody else falls under the prohibition of putting the stumbling block before the blind. And you'll tell me that maybe they would get it anyways. So what's the point? What's the difference I give it to them? So we have to know that the sages tell us that there is still a Isur Messiah. Messiah means that there is a rabbinic prohibition to help somebody do a sin, even if they would do it on their own, they would get it from somewhere else. from the Torah perspective, if you're the only source, then it's a prohibition from the Torah. But if they could get it anyways and you still give it to them, that's only still a isur derabanan, a rabbinic prohibition. There is a commandment in the Torah, in Sefer Vayikra, in Perek Tet Yutet, Pasuk Tet Zayin. It says over there, Lo ta'amod al dam ra'echa. You cannot stand on the blood of your brother, of your friend. That means that we all have an obligation, even if we ourselves are not here who are using marijuana, we all have an obligation if we see our brothers or our fellow Jews suffering and addicted and not being able to understand the severity of the matter, we have an obligation to go to them and to help them and to speak to people who could help them, even if you yourself cannot help them. The Gemara Masechet Pesachim Kuf Yud Gimel 113a says the Rav told Rav Chia, his son. Rav's son was Rav Chia. He told his son, do not take drugs even as a medication, even as a medicine. Rashi says, why did he tell him that? Rashi says it's because he's going to become dependent on it. He's going to have a habit, and then he's going to waste money on it. So that's why Rav told Rav Chia, don't take drugs, even for a medicine. So the sages tell us that what we see is just because you have a good reason, you have a reason because it's going to heal your pain, still Rav recommended against it in the Gemara. A lot of times people have a question. The question they have is, well, what's the difference between this, smoking, marijuana, and drinking? Drinking is also a drug. Alcohol is also a drug in a way. So if Torah permits drinking alcohol, and we do see it's a mitzvah in many situations to drink alcohol, so how do we reconcile drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana? It should be that if this one is allowed, the other one should be allowed. We do know that alcohol is not 100% good in every sense. There are a lot of situations with Torah we do see it brought downfall to many people if it was used in the wrong way. For example, Noah, we know what happened to Noah, how he got defiled after he came out of the ark because he became drunk from wine. We know Nadav and Abihu, according to one opinion of the sages, they went into the temple and they were intoxicated and that's why they died. They tried to serve God, tried to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu through a state of intoxication, which was put tremendous judgment on them. The Gemara Masechet Brachot Chavtet Amud Bet says, Eliyahu Navi told Rabbi Yehuda, don't drink and you won't sin. So we do see in the Gemara that Eliyahu Navi saying, you're right, even though drinking is normally permitted, but in general, don't get accustomed to it, don't drink and you won't come to sin because a lot of times it could bring to sin. Everyone is always bothered with the Gemara Masechet Megillah on Zayin Amud Bet says that Chayav Inish Libsume. On Purim, we have to get drunk, the Gemara says, till we don't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Arur Haman. So we do see that the Torah does promote drinking on Purim. So we have to know that the Gemara says afterwards that there was a story how Rabbah ended up killing Reb Zera. The Gemara says that Rabbah invited Reb Zera to his meal on Purim. They got drunk, and to the point where, for some odd reason, the Gemara says that Rabbah ended up killing Reb Zera, and he ended up having to pray, and he did Mechiyat HaMetim. He resurrected Reb Zera, and Reb Zera got invited to Rabbah's house the next year, and Reb Zera declined. He didn't want to rely on a miracle that maybe the same thing will happen again. But what do we see from this Gemara? The Rabbeinu Ephraim, one of the Rishonim, explained that why is the Gemara saying this story of Rabbah and Reb Zera? Rabbah killed Reb Zera on the Suda Purim when they got drunk, right after this Gemara about how you have to get drunk at Purim. So the Rabbeinu Ephraim says something unbelievable. He says the Torah, the Gemara is saying the story to teach you what happens in a situation where if you overdo it on Purim. Look what it could happen, that even a mistake came by the sages that the person ended up killing another person because of they got too drunk on Purim. The Bet Yosef in Hilchot Purim quotes the Rabbeinu Ephraim, he quotes the Orchot Chaim, and he says that getting drunk is forbidden. It is not allowed. People have this misnomer, and yet it's Shabbat, it's Purim, it's a mitzvah to get drunk. You could just drink as much as you want, and it's a free hall pass. And the Bet Yosef writes Halacha b'shem Rabbeinu Ephraim and Orchot Chaim that it's totally not allowed to get drunk, even on Purim. And if you, for the Sephardic community members here, the Chazon Ovadia writes, or Ovadia Yosef, Alav Shalom, the great posek, He writes in Chazon Ovadia in Daf Kufayin Gimel. He says that on Purim, a person's halachically recommended drink a little bit more wine than he's used to, and he should fall asleep from that little tipsiness, from that little amount of wine he drank. He should fall asleep from it. He should wake up and continue to do mitzvot on Purim, as opposed to a person drinking a tremendous amount, getting totally intoxicated, and not being able to say Birkat Hamazon, not being able to do mincha, not being able to do spend the rest of the holy day of Purim, which we know the Zohar says that Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim is Yom HaKippurim. It's the day like Purim. So if Yom Kippur is holy, you should know Purim is, in a sense, holier. So a person wouldn't want to spend it totally intoxicated. Now, another question a lot of people can have is, why can't we have, you're telling me that really it's a misconception you're allowed to get drunk. No, you're not allowed to get drunk. The Rambam writes in Ilchot Deot that a person who gets drunk is a sinner. If I could find the Lashon, I will. But a person can have a question of why can't we say, here I found the Rambam. The Rambam writes in Ilchot Deot, Perek He Halacha Gimel, Shachacham Shotei Yain, when a wise man drinks wine, Eno Shotei Kedei Lishot Achila Shel Ma'av. He's only supposed to drink in order to soften the food in his stomach. He says, "V'kol ha'mishtaker arei ze choteh." Says the Rambam, whoever gets drunk from alcohol, what is he called? He's called a choteh. He's called a sinner. U'meguneh. This is something that's shameful. U'mafsid chokhmato, and you lose your wisdom. So that's the Rambam. So you see the Rambam doesn't promote getting intoxicated. So really, getting intoxicated is not permitted from halacha, just for, even in the mitzvah situation like Purim. Certainly during the week, certainly during Shabbat. Even though we do know there's a concept of drinking alcohol in Kiddush, there's Simchat Yom Tov, being happy on the holiday, you drink some wine. The Gemara says that makes the person happy on Yom Tov, drinking 4 cups of wine on Pesach, but still, to get to the point of intoxicated, that's not allowed. However, a person can have a question, so why can't I drink a little bit? I'll drink a little bit of alcohol, and just like I'll drink a little bit of alcohol, I'll have a little bit of marijuana. I won't overdo it. I won't get drunk with alcohol, and I won't get high, super high with the marijuana. I'll do a little bit of this, and I'll do a little bit of that. So also in regards to this question, the sages tell us that actually the doctors tell us that it's different. The chemicals of THC versus the chemicals that alcohol brings into the body are actually work differently, and the alcohol leaves the body much faster. And the way that the THC interacts with the body is way more intense in the beginning. So therefore, you can have a person who smokes a little bit and will get higher than if he drinks a little bit. Drinking a little bit won't get you super high, as opposed to smoking a little bit will get you a bigger high. And the components of the THC in your body take a much longer time to leave your body, as opposed to the alcohol, which leaves much faster. So it takes a longer time for a person to get over it. We do know that the Rambam recommends drinking a little bit of wine. It says it has health benefits. And we do know that every time that the sages spoke about drinking, most of the time, if not all the time, was associated with wine. So wine, there is actually a mitzvah because it has also health benefits, as opposed to marijuana. If a person's not sick, a person doesn't have a medicinal need, well, not necessarily is there any health benefit. We also know that if the sages tell us to do the mitzvot with alcohol, like Kiddush, and being happy on Yom Tov, and the 4 cups on Pesach, who are we to extend it? You only have that, what they told us. Who are we to extend it to other things like marijuana? Maybe if you would extend it, you would extend it to cocaine, you would extend it to any other drug. You would say, if alcohol is okay, so then all the drugs become okay. This is a drug, that is a drug. But we have to know that. Just to wrap up, I wanted to discuss a little bit of why do we see so many people using it. I know this is not my place to speak. I'm sure the other people the other great people who came will, give their 2 cents as well and give a nice perspective on it. But from my personal dealing with a lot of these people, I feel that in the community and in the world at large, people are having a hard time dealing with all their anxiety and their problems. There's a lot of stress in the world going on right now, and each individual has their own stress personally. And there is the key to success is having the right tools to be able to deal with your stress. And if you don't have the right tools, either you don't have Torah knowledge, and you don't know how the Torah promotes dealing with your stress, and you don't have mentors, you don't have people you look up to, or role models who give you good advice on how to, deal with your stress, it's very easy to fall into the quick fixes of how to deal with your stress. And we see a lot of people, they don't want to deal with the pain and the stress and the anxiety, so they rather smoke marijuana and turn their quote unquote their light bulb off, so to speak. They turn off their head, and I leave my reality for a little bit. I leave this pain, I leave the suffering for a little bit. I'd rather keep going to this quick band-aid fix in order to deal with my problems, as opposed to really learning skills, really learning tools on how to deal with my stress in general. So it could be that we shouldn't judge these people so badly, because we need to realize there's a reason why they're doing this. There's a lot of stress they're going through, and we just need to give them. You could tell a person it's forbidden, it's most likely he won't stop. It's very hard for them to stop, but a person has to realize that the best thing to do would be to give them the tools to be able to continue and deal with the future, as opposed to not giving them a better option. You have to provide a better option. Kabbalistically, we're Sfaradim, so we always have to touch a little bit of the Zohar and what the Kabbalists say. So there's a great sage in Eretz Israel who was called the Chalban, who was a Kabbalist, who was known as the milkman, but he was known as the milkman because he was a hidden person. He didn't want to tell anybody he was a Kabbalist. His name was Rav Chaim HaKohen. He writes in his Sefer Asri Legefen, he says that spiritually, marijuana brings a lot of immorality. It brings a lot to Gama Brit. It brings the person to immorality. He says that Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, very interestingly, Rabbi Nachman of Breslev did not use marijuana, even though he had the ability to, because he had a sickness of tuberculosis, and that's why he died. And he had the ability to take the marijuana even as medicinal, and he chose not to, and to suffer through his tuberculosis, and because he said that marijuana has ruach tumah. Rabbi Nachman of Breslev said that the marijuana has in it a spiritual poison, and has in it impurity, and it brings a person closer to sins as opposed to holiness, and therefore he refused to use it. And he writes, the Chalban writes in Asir Geffen, that he actually, Rabbi Nachman also cursed it. He was so against it that he cursed it. So these people who claim that in Breslev it's recommended and it's part of Hasidism is to get high, that is also not recommended. Just to end off, very interestingly, the people, a lot of times they claim that, well, Rabbi, it helps me pray, it helps me learn. I'll smoke marijuana, I'll all of a sudden understand the Gemara. I'll smoke marijuana, all of a sudden I connect to the praying, I connect to the singing, I connect to Hashem. Person has to realize that could be true, but could be that's from Tumah sources. But more than that, the mitzvot that we get in Olam Haba, we get is from our toil, it's from our effort. And when a person uses these things and makes it very easy for him, and through these drugs, it makes it, I connect so well. That's not really using your effort. That's not really using your tools Hashem gave you, and you're really cutting yourself short. And then we know the sages tell us the fum tzara agra, according to the suffering is the reward, and you're taking away from yourself all the reward. The whole entire mitzvah is only meaningful because you worked upon yourself, and not because it was super easy for you. So it comes out that according to the consensus of our sages, since it is hazardous to our health, it's under Mishmat Me'od Nafshechem. And Ramosha Feinstein gave many other reasons why it's not allowed. Ben Sora Moreh, it's not considered Kedoshim Tiyu. Chaim Kanievsky said it's Sama Mavet. We know that a person has to make sure that he himself does not begin. He helps other people stop. And B'ezrat Hashem, now that we know a little bit more of these sources, we'll be able to be more confident to raise awareness in the community and tell one another that we should save ourselves and save the community from, just because it became legal in New York or there's more businesses, doesn't mean the Torah necessarily agrees with that, and therefore a person has to always do Shelat Rav. Thank you for listening, and B'ezrat Hashem, we shall see the Geulah, V'Rabbi Amenu, Amen V'Amen.
Rabbi Frankel?
Thank you for coming out. Happy to make it. Thank you, my son. Thank you, Rabbi. It's really amazing to be here, and I love to be able to do these events. It's super important. It's actually kind of surreal a little bit, this one, because the last 20 years I've been working with teenagers, I've been working with addictions. I've been dealing with a lot of this. And one of the big problems that we've always had when it came to dealing with addictions, when it came to marijuana use, when it came to the harder drugs, I think a lot of the issues within our community is that when it comes from a good place, we want what's best, we want to believe that we're really striving. And these things don't affect us. And there's a sense of denial that we can't talk about it, it doesn't happen by us, we can't speak. And yet, here we are, we're talking about these things. But the pendulum has swung. We're kind of on the other side. And instead of really talking about the problems, the underlying issues, the risks, as a society in general, at large, and as even as a community, instead we come to normalize it. We're talking about it. When we started programming, we were talking about people doing it in schools, about the kiddush, things. It's become almost a normal thing in our society. We're still not ready to talk about the problems. We're still not ready to talk about the dangers, the risks that are involved when we get involved in these substances. Instead, we're talking about, how should this be? Is it okay? And when should we do it? How does it enhance it? It's better now. And we sort of miss the point. And if that's the case, then to that end, has anything really changed? When we refuse to see problems, we refuse to acknowledge inherent risks, then we put ourselves, put our families, we put our communities at risk. You see, the thing is that addiction doesn't discriminate. Addiction doesn't care who you are. The addiction doesn't care if you're rich, doesn't care if you're poor, doesn't care how religious you are, it doesn't care what community you live in, what good, addiction hits everybody across the board, including within our own communities. So we could sit here, we could debate, marijuana, should it be classified as a drug? Is it really so bad? We could debate legalization. It's good. It's not good. It's not the government's right. There's nothing wrong. We could do all of that. But when we know the risks of addiction, and over the last 20 years, and I'm sure people in this room have friends, when we've seen the devastation of addiction, we've seen how it's torn apart people's lives, how it's ruined families, how people in recovery, and I've talked to some of the guys I work with, and they're 18, 19, 20. It's like, how many Levias have they gone through? How many of their friends are in rehab? How many, that's a crazy concept. How many of my friends from high school, passed away? None. It's not a normal thing what we're dealing with. So, when we're talking about this, and we recognize and we've seen the effects, so how do we give a mind-altering substance, even one that's fun, even when the world deems is safe? How do we take that risk? How do we give it a foothold in our communities? How do we give a foothold in our lives, of our friends, over our loved ones? And for this reason, I think events like this are super important, because we're in that same place. Like, we're talking about it, it's awesome, but we're talking about we come from the other direction. Instead of talking about, that doesn't happen, we're saying, no, that's great, but what's the problem? So we need to really be able to open up, because that lack of education 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 15 years ago, that lack of education put our kids at risk, put our youth at risk, with devastating consequences. This same lack of education, this same absence of real education, real knowledge, is going to do the same things to put our families, our schools, and our communities at risk. There's no question. I often have with parents, there are lots of different issues that you need to talk to your kids about, but you don't know when it's right. They're awkward, they're hard, they're uncomfortable. So we push it off because if it's too early, it's not good. But inevitably, it's this really small window, and when you miss it, it's not like you could let's talk about this now. No, they already got all the information from their friends, from the internet, from wherever it is. So is that who we want educating about marijuana, about drug use, about all the other things there? If we're not going to talk and speak about it, the education will be there, and just might not be, particularly in the world today and the direction where it's going, where everything is okay and everything is legalized, and the translation is, so it must be okay. We assume that legalization means that it's healthy, that's good. Bob mentioned medicinal usage. The fact that something is a medication or is approved for medication, that doesn't make it good. Chemotherapy is great for cancer. I don't recommend anybody tries it as a hobby. It's not great. It's approved for very few disorders, and those disorders are generally disorders that they have no other option for. But we very quickly, and again, if we're not going to have these conversations, we very quickly get lost in the, it's medicinal, it's fine. Or the better than, so you mentioned there, and again, you mentioned alcohol, the comparison. We could get into alcohol, we could discuss it. But better than is not a good argument. Better than doesn't mean good. We have a problem with alcohol in our community. There's a place for it. We often misuse it. We need to deal with that. And even if it's better than, that doesn't make it good. And we could argue, because personally, there's many aspects of it that I think are not better than. It's not for here right now, but we can certainly discuss. Not always better than. So tonight we're here talking about marijuana and halacha. I'm not here, to talk about the halachic aspects. Can you daven with the minyan? Are you allowed to make brachos? What about does this qualify? I'm here to talk about the Hashkafic issues. Is it proper? Is it okay to be mevata one's das? Hashem gave us das. We're allowed it for no reason. Just is it considered holiness, especially code-based measures? We're going in here, we're doing these rules now. What about Torah study? We're an obligation to engage. When we limit ourselves and we're not able to engage fully, or we're not motivated. One of the big, things of marijuana users across the board is that motivation. Is that muktal? Could we just say it's good? And we believe I function great on that one. It doesn't affect me. Is that true? Are we as sensitive? Are we as attuned as we can be to our spouse, to our children, to our friends, to our neighbors, to people around us? Are we aware? Right? We're having a good time and we're laughing. We think everyone else is appreciating that. Is that true? But again, there are bigger people than me to discuss the halacha and the hashkafa. Instead, I want to really just focus a little bit on the potential risk. Now, I do speak with teams often. Because I was really going to focus a little bit more because we're talking about the idea of an halacha. We're talking about how it's becoming interesting for you. So I want to more a little bit broader than not just the risk at youth. Because that's one of these misconceptions that the kids it's bad, but adults it's fine. Kiddush it's great. It's enhancing the Shabbat. So, and again, aside from getting into if it's laced, because that's always a thing that the reality is, that's a big concern. And there was a spite of laced marijuana. So everything's safe, it's great. I know my dealer, it's all good. And there were many people, unfortunately, that died in New York because of laced marijuana with fentanyl. So you would never do heroin, you would never do an opiate, and God forbid, and Hashem, but what happens if it's there? Often, that's a hard one to get into the argument with people, and they're like, nah, especially today with the legalization thing, no, I would never take that, and I don't use lace stuff. I own the Premier, I get my dispensary, I have a prescription, and all that, and it's a great argument and all that, but I still would doubt it because is that really true? Once when you're on vacation and you forgot to bring your script and you're in a state where there is no dispensary, you're really not going to get it. So there's risk there. And forget about you. We make it okay. And there's that next person, there's everybody else. But again, putting that aside from being laced, let's talk about the risks and the issues with marijuana itself. So, at the end of the day, marijuana is a psychoactive drug, which means that it affects our brain chemistry. It mixes things up. Anytime that somebody touching my things, or my kid wants to take things apart, or someone's like, "Oh, let me work on your car." If you're going to take it apart, I want to know you can put it back together. Right? We're going in there, we're mixing up the brain, and we're hoping that everything will fall back into place the way it is. And maybe more or less, Hashem created us with an amazing machine that can, to whatever degree, repair itself and reset itself. But we're messing around with that. And how much do we want to really mess around with our brain? That's what it is. It's a psychoactive drug. And that again, that disorientation that's the high, that's the fun, that's the thrill. But we just want to make sure that everything comes back together. And obviously, with more prolonged use, everyone thinks it's just one time. It never is one time. But the more we use it, the more these risks increase. So studies find that people with the extended use of marijuana, adults included, have lower dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical in our brain that allow us to enjoy things. So yes, marijuana's high, it feels great, it's amazing, it shoots up, it's all great, and then we drop. But the problem is that it's not just that we generally drop lower, but with the more and more use, we begin to not be able to create that dopamine on our own. So we're not able to enjoy the regular things in life that are supposed to give us happiness, which either means that we increase our usage because it's the only way I can be happy, or we move on to harder drugs, which I know that hardly never, or we're depressed and miserable, which none of those are really great options. So that long-term thing, it affects a person's concentration, the ability to concentrate. So, concentration is important when you want to accomplish a task. When you're in school and you want to do well, you want to study, you want to have that motivation, you want the ability to concentrate. When your kids are talking to you, as we get older, none of us like it if we're going to talk to our parents and they're completely not here. It affects our concentration. It affects memory, particularly the short-term memory. There's increases of anxiety and depression, and this is especially true in youth because, as was mentioned, it actually affects brain development. When they do brain scans, the brain changes and the brain doesn't develop as it should. But even in adults, there's increased anxiety and depression. People love to say that there's no withdrawal, there's no effects, and I've seen it. It's just simply not true. It's not as severe as maybe an alcohol withdrawal or a heroin withdrawal, whatever. But there's definitely they're irritable, they're angry, they're upset, and because as much as it's not anxiety, depression, are not just about brain development. There's learned behaviors as well. We're called learned dysfunctional, learned insufficient ability to do it. Because what happens when I can't cope with something, so I smoke and then I'm feeling good and I'm okay. So I learn to cope. And I never really get used to it, and especially when I'm growing up in development, but even as an adult, as I train myself to more and more, then I develop bad habits, and that's what I become used to. And suddenly, when I don't have it available to me, I don't have the ability, and that makes me very anxious, or very depressed, or very irritable. More so. So what happens with that is, so increase my anxiety, depression, and it leaves me with the inability to cope without the drug, or in effect, coping with the drug. Because again, I think that I'm doing a great job, but I'm stressed out because I just got this crazy bill. Or I'm stressed out because my wife's upset at me, or I'm stressed out because whatever. I can't handle it, I can't do it, so I smoke a little bit. I feel better, it's chill, it's all good, it's no problem. That bill still needs to be paid. The fact that I'm okay, the fact that my wife is still upset, I might not notice, but did I solve it? Did I actually cope with it? So, this learned inability, these learned problems, even amongst adults, is you end up not being able to cope without and unable to cope properly with it. There's risk of developing addictions. There's increased risk. Now, this isn't getting to the argument you'll hear whenever you go speak to, and people are like really into their marijuana smoking because culturally today, it's not a gateway drug. We'll have that argument. So it's true. Not everyone who smokes pot, not everyone who tries marijuana will end up using harder drugs, hence the definition of gateway drug. But I have to tell you, in my experience, I've met very few people who have tried harder drugs without first trying the marijuana. So yeah, it's not causality. It doesn't mean if I smoke this, I'm automatically going to be a drug addict. But I definitely increase my risk of moving on, particularly if I'm using it for a reason beyond the fun, is I need it. I need to get that feeling. And when it doesn't give it to me anymore, I still need that. So I'll look elsewhere. And again, was mentioned the altered perceptions, which isn't just about, things look trippy and are cool. It's also, when I'm with altered perceptions, how do I accomplish a task? How do you drive a car? How do you take care of something? It suddenly, it's dangerous. And again, people's needs not met, things not being done properly. In high doses, like was mentioned, the hallucination, delusion, and of course, in the rare cases, there can develop severe psychiatric disorders. And I have to say that we say that that's rare cases, so it's the 1 in a million. I've had, I think 5 or 6 cases of people, kids that have smoked just marijuana, not harder drugs, and really go ill and have never recovered, are not okay today. Their brains will never be the same. So we could say it's rare, but I've been with several of them. So yeah, it's rare. And the point is everyone believes, it's not them, but we don't know that. So that first time, is it really? Are you really safe? Are you really okay? I don't know. And of course, beyond the physical, there's a social impact. I might be okay and everything's wonderful. What about my spouse? What about my family? What about my friends? How they impact it? How's my behavior with everybody else? Now, we can debate all of these things. If it's really a problem, it's not so bad, it's rare. I'm an adult, it's my choice, I have freedoms, can't help do I can do that. Like we said, alcohol is worse, all these great arguments. But at the end of the day, everybody agrees, even if we want to argue about all these things and adults and whatever, the biggest proponents of marijuana usage agree that adult usage is not teen usage, not adolescent usage. That across the board, everyone who argues that there's no harm for adults to use it, everyone agrees that for adolescents, for teens, for young adults up to age 25, there are severe drawbacks, severe dangers and risks in smoking marijuana. Now, to me, when people ask me about marijuana, I think perhaps the greatest danger actually is the fact that there are those out there who can smoke successfully, who seem to be able to manage their living life, they're taking care of their family, they're getting out for work, they smoke pot. That's great. And the problem is that everybody who sees them decides, oh yeah, that's me. I'm going to be the same way, and that's okay. Now, first of all, is it true? Are they really so successful? They appear to be, but do you really know what's going on? Is his wife, maybe I'm going to get lots of calls from people that their husband's great and he's the best guy in the community, but she's miserable and she's like really struggling with the problem. Do his kids really feel like their needs are met? It's like he looks great, but is it true? But even let's say that it's true. It's ignoring the fact that yes, you see the one guy who seems to be put together. What about the hundreds that are out there that haven't done successfully? No, but of course that's not. Now I'm going to do that one. More so, is it true? Is it really the same? I have this with guys all the time. They want to give me that point to that one person. So I'm like, so let's understand. That guy's got a job, gets up every morning, takes care of things, running his business, takes care of his family, is where he needs to be, 5 a.m. His husband's everything's great. Thursday night, he comes home, he gets together with his friends, they have a little share, chill out, and they smoke a little bit. Now, I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying I prove it. I'm not saying it's a good idea. But let's talk about that guy for a second. And you're really the same, smoking 20 times a day. So we like to equate things when it works for us. But most of us who start doing that, it's not really true with a lot of the guys that I work with. It's not. You're smoking all the time. Your whole life is wrapped around that. And the idea of adult usage and teen usage, but you do that. Regardless of it, as we get started, right? After the fact, we have an argument. After that, we could talk about, for the last 20 years, I've been doing this and everything is great. And we could, decide if that's true or not. But how do I start this process by saying, well, I see my neighbor does it, and I see my friends do it, and it's all going to be good, so I'm going to be okay also. The end of the day is that we're rolling the dice. Do you know, after the fact versus my plan? Yeah, it's all going to be good. How many things we say, yeah, this is how it's going to be. And then once we start down that road, is it really? Once we start down that road, we have to deal with that reality. And the problem is that only time will tell. And if we're wrong, it may be too late. Now, there's a lot more to talk about this, and we can talk about the differences with the marijuana and get onto other things. And, and this is also all focusing on the idea of marijuana as recreational, as fun. We're not dealing with people who are using because they're coping with things that they can't handle or as an escape, right? The underlying issues, traumas, and things that should be dealt with, and because they're not ready to deal with it, they don't want to deal with it, they found a solution. Because those people almost inevitably end up going to harder drugs or more dangerous activities because there's things that needs to be dealt with. So we use marijuana for a few different reasons. Generally say, to do good, to feel good. People use drugs to do good, to feel good, to feel better. Right. So we've been talking some more about the fun, the recreation aspects. But lots of people are not just about the recreation. They're about I just can't because there's things going on. You need to deal with those things, not bury them. Because by burying them, they're going to blow up, and then they'll be in a far worse place. But I just want to finish really with a shift in thought or really in presentation that I had when I speak to in a lot of schools, and I think it really applies to our community at large, the adult population as well. We believe we're all invincible. Meaning each of us individually believes that we ourselves, I'm invincible. I understand these things happen. I understand there are people that'll be messed up by it. but not by me. It can't happen to me. I'll be okay. And we have a hard time imagining that really something bad comes to us. So I'd say that, maybe you're right. Maybe all good. You'll be fine. What about everybody else? What about the wife and kids? Are they being taken care of properly? Are they really okay? Are they getting the attention they deserve? But let's say they are. What about other risks? Having it around, you actually leave it out. It's not alcohol. It smells disgusting and it tastes disgusting. Again, you develop your taste and all that. But that little kid walking around and finds a bottle of alcohol, that 5-year-old, he doesn't want it. Gummies and brownies, that's exciting. And it's happened. It's happened. Someone left in his armrest in his car and on his desk in his office. Yeah, and the little 5-year-olds go running around and find candy, right? It's really dangerous. Now, of course, nobody here would do that. We're all responsible. It's not like, we're stoned or anything, right? We're using the person's stoned. They're impaired. As not dangerous as it is, I don't know if I would really trust their responsibility to end on it. But even leaving that all aside, what about everyone else you smoke with? We just went through how there are dangers. It can lead to heart attack. It can lead to different things. Maybe you're right. You're okay. Marijuana is a social drug. Most people don't smoke on their own, or at least don't smoke on their own till they're a couple of years down the road and they really can't manage without it. And then it's just what they do because that's what they do, whatever they do, whenever they do, they can't do anything without it. But certainly when we're starting or getting at it, it's a social drug. So if we recognize that there are problems, so granted, you're invincible, won't happen to you. But what about everybody else? Are you okay with that? Are you okay? Look around the room, look at the friends sitting next to you. Who are you okay with saying that? It's been nice knowing you, dude. Which one are you going to say? Which one of your friends you're like, you're okay with losing them? You're okay with them developing this? You're okay with them going, who are we good at? We're literally playing Russian roulette. When there's Russian roulette, you got the gun, a couple of cylinders spinning. It's a lot of fun. Get your adrenaline rushing. It's exciting. But someone's going to get that bullet. Yeah, it may not be you. Are we good with that? Now, obviously, the adults will argue. Adults, it's their choice, not me. There is peer pressure. And even with adults, there's a social pressure. No one's going to say, no, I don't do it. Everyone has a hard time. They want to be cool. They want to fit in. If that's the cool thing, no one's going to admit that they had a bad reaction to it or that they're struggling, or at least not till it really becomes a problem, unless we say that's not okay, unless we build a culture that says that, no, this is a problem. It's not cool. It's whatever an individual chooses on their thing, we don't have to approve of that. It's certainly that we don't want that's going to influence everybody else because it's really what we're playing with. And maybe more poignantly, what about your own kids, or what about the kids at large in our community? So, because now we're not talking about to just adolescents and teenagers and you guys can't smoke and stuff. We're saying that this is going on in the community. And the problem is that, I want to smoke and I want to smoke in shul and it's all cool and all that. But, my kids are going to understand because, it's for adults. It's not for kids. Me, not you. Do as I say, not as I do. All that kinds of, that really doesn't resonate so great with teens. There's no teen that I know that, like, when their father tells them, me and not you, and I can do it, it's okay, just listen to me. And, I haven't met a teen that was like, cool. That doesn't work. And we know that the two most significant risk factors when it comes to teen and adolescent usage is perception of risk and peer usage, which means if I believe something to be okay, if it's legalized, if it's, the world saying it's safe and it's totally fine, I'm more likely to use it. And if I see my friends using it, if I see my family use it, see my community, I see people I respect using, I'm more likely to use. And as we stated earlier, teen usage is not like adult usage. It's undeniably across the board, according to everybody, negative, disastrous effects. With your own kids, with teens, there's no reset button. There's no do-over. What about them? Are you okay? You should only know good things.
Okay.
V'Luvachai Nissan for hosting this event and organizing this event. Truthfully, I'm actually quite embarrassed and quite ashamed that that this room is so empty, considering that all of us over here know the severity of the issue, especially how it plagues our community. So it's very, very sad. But all right, Baruch Hashem, I guess it's being recorded, so hopefully it might reach a wider audience. I would be even more upset, but one of my students called me earlier today, and he goes, "Oh, Moshe, I heard you giving the lecture." I said, "Yeah." So he says, "Should I come?" I said, "Good idea." He says, "Isn't just by coming you're automatically guilty by association?" I guess that's probably why the room is empty. I guess everyone figured that if they come, if you're a pothead, if you come and you come here, I mean, automatically everyone knows you're a pothead, because why else are you here in a marijuana, a shir about marijuana or about drugs and things like that? I told him, if I give a shir about Shabbos, that means everyone who's there doesn't keep Shabbos? Is guilty of breaking Shabbos? No. So you come to a shir about marijuana, doesn't mean you're automatically guilty of being a pothead or whatever. I want to thank our previous speaker. Thank you so much, Rabbi Zeno, for your words. Very encouraging, very eye-opening, very enlightening. Being in this community for so long, and I deal with the youth a lot, Baruch Hashem, and it's too often where you see people using drugs, and it's almost very rare that I meet someone who doesn't use drugs. Very, very rare. Very rare. It's a huge pandemic in our community. And Baruch Hashem, not everyone is an opiate user, but most of the people who are using drugs, it's usually marijuana. But all those opiate users who we know or who have died recently, none of them started out with, smoking heroin or injecting heroin or, somewhere in a crack house next to left rack. That's not where it started. It started with a friend, with a joint, or a friend that or with a weed pen that they have. It's definitely much scarier from whenever I was young. And whenever I was young, it was bad. It's so much more so now. I hope that we have this shir more often, that maybe people will, if they see that it's a weekly thing or a monthly thing, that little aspect of like guilty by association would be, a little bit pushed to the side. They see that it's a normal issue, just like Shabbat, just like kosher, just like, rabbis upstairs giving shirim and hilchos nefilot yadayim, and we have to know, the things that affect us practically. And, laws of Shabbat are beautiful, but for most people, for everybody, it only affects us once a week. But if you're a drug user, it actually affects you every single day. So to a certain degree, learning laws about, or the musar involved and the hashkafic ramifications involved when it comes to using drugs is in a way much more serious than even Shabbat. How much more so when, the drugs in the long run will lead a person who is a severe addict to even break Shabbat or to, who knows, there's countless sins. There's no sin that an addict won't do whenever he's addicted. There's nothing that holds him back. If he's ready to kill himself to get his hand on drugs, he's ready to kill others also. It's just a matter of time. Given the right opportunity, given the right circumstances, and most of the murders in America are drug related. Most of the murders in America are drug related. So we cannot say that it only stops at the self. It affects and it harms everyone around you. People ask me often, what's up with marijuana? How dangerous is it? How dangerous is it not? I say to them quite often that actually, in my opinion, it's probably the worst drug around. It's more dangerous than heroin and crack cocaine and ecstasy and acid and shrooms. And you say, what are you talking about? What are you saying? Like, what are you talking about? I say it's the worst one. Because a heroin addict can one day wake up and say, yo, what am I doing with my life? He knows what he's doing is wrong. He just can't help it. He's an addict, but he knows what he's doing is wrong. He knows that he's hurting the people around him and including himself. People who potheads, almost never wake up from realizing that what they're doing is wrong. They feel that they're not harming anyone. They feel that they're not harming themselves, and the damage that it does to a person psychologically is so subtle and so slow that you most potheads don't even realize that they even have this problem, and they, as a result of which, they never seek for help. If you go to any drug rehab center and you talk to them, yeah, I have this friend, he's using drugs, I want to bring him to the rehab. Say, oh, what drug is he using? Say marijuana. Say, oh, sorry, we can't help with that. We don't have it. It's not considered a drug. It's not considered a, they don't even have. They can't even help. There's nothing. There's nothing. There are no drug centers for marijuana use. There's Alcohol Anonymous for alcoholics. There's places for heroin addicts, for crack cocaine addicts, for ecstasy, and all types of all the other drugs. But for marijuana, there's nothing. And that's part of the problem. The problem is how society views it. And not too many people who are heroin addicts speak fondly about being a heroin addict. But potheads love to glorify the fact that they're potheads. They'll walk around with a marijuana leaf shirt wherever they go, they'll make sure they get the special Adidas, they have like all types of stuff inside it. They love to show off that they're potheads. There's a certain cultural type in the local vernacular, right? Of being that. And a lot of it has to do with, in movies, mainly hip hop music, right? Very rarely, I'm sure you could find a song in the hip hop world about, and really hip hop culture is today the main culture in the Goyish world. And there's almost very rarely you'll find a hip hop song that doesn't talk about weed and doesn't talk about drugs and so on and so forth. So the more and it's impossible to listen to that music and not want to be like them. It's whenever you listen to music, whenever you listen to these Goyish things, these Goyish outlets, you somehow idolize them. And it's just a matter of time until you start thinking like them and acting like them, and then marijuana becomes your life like it is for them. I spoke to one kid one time. I go, he was a kid in the high school. He wasn't doing too good. I said, who's your role model? Do you have a role model in life? He says, yeah, Tony Montana. I said, Tony Montana is your role model in life? Yeah, Scarface. You know the movie, Rabbi? I'm like, yeah, I know the movie. You mean the guy who, after losing like all his friends and family, died with 15,000 bullet holes? He's like, yeah, that guy. Like, he never looked at it like that. He never, because Tony Montana is glorified, in the cinematic world, and also in the hip hop songs as well. They speak so highly of it. People walk around with Scarface on their shirts and sweaters like that. It's absolutely disgusting and appalling, but we don't view it that way because our filtration system that comes through the society that we live in, right, comes through those outlets, and you go, wow, Tony Montana was the man. Say hello to my little friend. Like they love to, they make something evil into something good, and there's no greater evil than that. There is no greater evil than making evil into good, right? Hitler would not have been successful unless he was able to tell people why, yeah, it's good to kill Jews. They're infestation, they're vermin, they're terrible. He never would have succeeded. What made his evil so great of an evil is that he was able to convince the masses that it was a good thing. And that's the greatest evil. And with marijuana, it's exactly the same thing. They've convinced everybody that it's so good. It's so good on the kaif level, and now they're trying to bring it into the medical level as well. Now, as far as medically goes, even medically, for the most part, today there's no heter at all, because now with 99% of all the things that marijuana can do for you, right? They have non-addictive drugs that can do, and also even CBD, which is also a byproduct of the marijuana plant, could fulfill a lot of those functions without the psychoactive aspect of it and without the addiction aspect of it. So I can't see why any Rav would give a heter for THC use in any way, shape, or form whenever it's known to be addictive, And because you have that cultural thing, like if a doctor prescribes oxycodone, for example, right? There is no culture around oxycodone for pain relief. There's no culture around it, right? You take it, you're done with the pain, your backache, your toothache, whatever it is, and you move on in life, right? Marijuana's not like that. There's a whole culture around it. There's stores, and who has the nicest pipe, and who could roll the nicest Dutch, and who could roll the best Philly, and it's just such a culture that they build around it. It's easy to get sucked in, and it's very, very, very hard to come out. So it becomes a very, very scary thing. The most important thing in a person's life, and nothing is more important than this, is your motivation in life, your ratzon in life, which really comes from your neshama. Every person has a different motivation, has a different ratzon, and that comes from each person's soul, right? What this person has a she'ifa for, this person has a strong, innate, internal desire to be who he wants to be, right? Comes from his motivation in life and his neshama. Marijuana kills a person's motivation in life. Even if it kills it. Yo, what do you want to do today? Nah, man, just chilling. Yo, come, let's go do this. Nah, boy, we good. You don't want to aspire to be anything great, because as long as you have your dime bag and as long as you have your weed pen, you're good. The party's here with me, baby. I have it in my pocket. I don't have to go anywhere. So as a result, you have limited yourself to no end to how great you could be and how great you could have been, just because of this one little bag, just because of this one little pen. And as it slowly kills your motivation in life, it's slowly killing your neshama. And of course, a person whose neshama is half dead is going to look for other drugs and other things in order to give himself chiyas, in order to give himself some aspect of liveliness. No one wants to feel dead. But a person who has a regular sickness, he knows that this sickness is causing him the sickness, and he doesn't have a warped view of the sickness. He knows the sickness is causing him this. But with marijuana use, a person can't even, he goes, no, I'm good, man. I go to work. I have a family. I have this. I have that with my friends. He's doing okay. He's not dying. He's all right. Now I realize that the neshama, the most important part of you, is dying. Your motivation in life is dying. And little by little, it trickles down. And they don't want to get out of bed in life, and you become depressed. And all of them, all marijuana users, no matter how much they try to flaunt how okay it is and how good it is and how accepted it is in culture, all of them feel ashamed inside. And that's why they try very hard to hide it from their parents, and they try hard to hide it from their boss, and they try hard to hide it from their wife and from their children. No one is proud of a pothead, really. No real pothead is going to go in front of his kids and show off that he's a pothead. Amongst his friends, who are just as stupid as him, and they think it's cool. He wants to play off that it's cool, right? But deep down inside, all of them know that it's bad. So as a result of which, what happens is that they start to draw themselves farther from their parents. They start to draw themselves farther from their children. They draw themselves farther from their wives. They draw themselves farther from their coworkers, because they can't build real relationships. Because to let you inside that part of me where you know that I have this weakness with marijuana, no, you can't do that. So it becomes a big problem, and it destroys relationships very slowly. You won't get into a fight with them. You just draw back from them. Eventually, so many kids and parents aren't getting along. These young adults, because of marijuana. They come home and they're irritated and they're agitated, and one word from their mom sets them on fire, and when your dad sets on the and you won't even realize that it's the weed. You think your mom is the problem, your dad is the problem, your wife and children are the problem, your boss is the problem, the stock market is the problem. You'll never ever put the blame on marijuana, because it's so subtle, and the damage that it does just creeps up on a person, and that's it. And how could there be any hope for a person who doesn't realize what he's doing is wrong? I had a Rebbe, he one time asked the question, so what's better, to if your hat is on fire and you feel the pain, you feel the burning, or if your hat is on fire and you don't feel the hurting. You don't feel the burning. Which one's worse? So one could have said, of course, if you feel the pain is worse. Your head is burning. It's on fire. You're burning. It hurts. No. If you don't feel your head is on fire, it's much worse. Because then you won't know to take off the hat, and eventually it's gonna burn you and you're gonna die. A person who feels the burning could take off the hat, douse out the fire, and he could continue living. A person who's a heroin addict, he knows his hat is on fire. Maybe he has a hard time taking that hat off, but he knows his hat is on fire. He could get help. People will see that his hat is on fire. Someone will help him douse it out. A person who's into weed, he doesn't even feel it. And little by little, that's what they call it burning. You want to burn? Because that's it. The person burns his life. Little by little. And that's what's so dangerous. And that's what's so unforgiving whenever it comes to marijuana use. Not to allow it in any way, shape, or form into our lives, into our families, and to cut off all of the cultural, systems we have around us that promulgate, the marijuana use, that promote marijuana use. We have to cut it off because it's just only a matter of time. I beg each and every one of you, never let your children listen to hip hop. Because it's just a matter of time until they start wanting to think and be Biggie and Tupac and Little Wayne, all these other, I don't know their names, or Hashkafic, and Tony Montana, and it's just a matter of time. And you have to be very careful whenever you let your kids listen to these songs and to watch these types of movies and things like that promote drug use. How can you expect a kid not to follow in that way when Hollywood makes it so awesome? Whenever the British world makes it so awesome, it becomes impossible. I don't blame anyone, God forbid, or look down at anyone who has this problem. Because I understand the culture and I understand the society and it is what it is. But that a person has to, Baruch Hashem over here, I don't know if I know, but a person, if you know someone who uses, please try to speak to them. Please try to find a way, to get that book, Marijuana and Halacha, in their hands, right? Because it's more than just Halacha, that book. It brings down a lot of things that a lot of potheads don't know. And a lot of not just potheads, but drug addicts in general don't know. Truth is, there's a lot to say. And no matter how much I speak about this subject, it's definitely not enough. But I just want maybe to leave you guys with one point. In Alcoholics Anonymous is a program, is an organization that they have been successful over the many years in helping thousands upon thousands. I don't even know exactly what the number is, but they've helped thousands upon thousands of people overcome alcoholism. And alcoholism is known, addiction-wise, they say it's even harder than heroin. Okay? Addiction-wise, even harder than heroin. And yet, Alcoholics Anonymous has been very, very successful in helping people to overcome alcohol abuse. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous has a 12-step program. And they have an app. You can download it for free. You can go online. You can look it up. They have books on it. Okay, and it's a 12-step program. And they say if you follow this 12-step program, you can overcome alcoholism. Now, the truth is that not only for alcoholism does it work, it actually works for anything and everything bad in your life that you're trying to get rid of, any addiction or any bad midah that you're trying to get rid of. It works for everything. All you have to do is whenever you read the 12-step program, every time it says alcohol, just substitute it for the thing that you're trying to work on. Whether it's overeating, whether it's oversleeping, whether it's marijuana, whether it's heroin, whatever it is, substitute it for the word alcohol. And you will see amazing results in your growth and in the trajectory of how you want to live your life. Now, just a quick preface, just a quick, because really the truth is you should go and look at the 12-step program. No matter who you are, no matter what you are, it's still a good thing to even if you're not addicted to anything, you're a perfect human being. It's a great thing to learn from. It's a huge source of insight, and I recommend it to anybody and everybody, no matter who you are, no matter where you are. And every step of the way, they actually tell the people to ask God for help, ask God for help, ask God for help. And even though Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious program, and they're not allowed to mention God because they want this, because like the Rav said earlier, that alcoholics, that addiction affects everybody, religious or not religious, people who think they're atheists and people who think they're Jewish, or whoever you might be. Addiction doesn't have a filtration system in that respect. So they want that it should apply to anybody and everybody. So they don't want to use the word God. They use a higher power. Okay? A higher power. But they admit that without the higher power, it's impossible to overcome alcoholism. Without that higher power. But every step of the 12-step program talks about the higher power, the higher power, the higher power, the higher power. Keep talking to the higher power. Ask him to help you. Recognize that you're helpless and only a higher power can help you. Recognize that you have a problem and only the higher power can help you. And thank the higher power that he helped you yesterday, right? That yesterday you didn't take alcohol, and thank the higher power that tomorrow he'll help you, right? Each step of the way is ask the higher power. So Baruch Hashem, we have a name for the higher power. We call him Hashem, okay? But you can call him whatever you want, as long as it helps you get off of drugs. You know, you want to call him higher power, call him higher power, okay? But the point is that yes, there is hope. Yes, there is help, and yes, it is 100% forbidden. But Baruch Hashem, just like every other avera, okay, or just like any other mitzvah, or any other thing you want to do for yourself and for your life, okay, through prayer you can achieve it, okay. And this 12-step program will give you a very nice, well organized, structured, detailed way of how you can do that. So it's a beautiful thing. And you don't even, if you know a person who's into drugs, you don't even have to tell. You want to tell them about the app. You want to tell them about the 12-step program. You don't even have to tell him. Oh, it's because you're a pothead, dude. Because he's not going to want to read it. Say, hey, I got so much physics from this. Like my sleeping is better, my eating habits are better. My anger habits are better. How I deal with this, how I deal with that is better. I think you would appreciate this. I think you're a great guy. And I think you love to grow. I think you you want to be awesome. So he himself, after realizing and reading that, reading and realizing, he himself will know, what it is that he needs to fix and how to take it to the next step. If we know anyone who's God forbid using, please pray for them. Pray that at least first of all they should realize that what it is wrong, and pray that Bezrat Hashem Hashem should give them the kochot to overcome it. If we care enough for each other, and I know Amisan cares, that's why he put this this shir tonight together, and everyone who's here obviously cares. And maybe some of us know one or two people, some of us may know more, who are into drugs. Doesn't matter what level of drugs they're into, okay? All addiction is bad, including the nicotine addiction as well. Today, nicotine addiction is much worse than it was 15 years ago. Everyone has their vape in their pocket, and back in the day, you had to go outside and smoke a cigarette and come back smelling like ash. Now you could just, look left, look right, smoke in the elevator, smoke in the bathroom, smoke in the staircase, smoke in your bedroom, right? No one will know. And it's in your pocket, and it's on you all the time. It's highly addictive. And these addictions, just once you're already addicted to something, even if it's just nicotine, addiction itself is a disease. It doesn't matter what you're addicted to. Just addiction is a disease. It creates a psychological problem in the person, and now he has opened up the doors for addiction. So now to be addicted to A, he's addicted to A, but now since the doors of addiction are open, to be addicted to B, C, and D are not not too far away. It's just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. So if you know anyone also with a nicotine addiction, please, I beg you, find them help. Please, I beg you, get them this 12-step program, and with Hashem's help, right, we can save a generation. We can save the world. The onslaught from the Bush community is very, very strong, and now with all these dispensaries opening up left and right, many of them by good, well-meaning Jewish businessmen, right? But they're not realizing that they don't know the effects. They themselves didn't become good businessmen by being potheads, right? So we should take caution. There's places that sell bleach. I don't think you would drink bleach. If you look at Clorox bleach, there's an OU on it also, right? I don't know if you know. Doesn't mean you should. Yeah, there's an OU on Clorox bleach, and on Palmolive dishes, liquid soap as well. Why? Because they want to let you know that you can use it like on your dishes, and it's not going to be a kashrus problem. Yeah, I'm serious. There's an OU on bleach. I promise you. So even if it's kosher, doesn't mean you should be drinking it. Doesn't mean doesn't mean you should be ingesting it. It's harmful for you. Kosher or not kosher, it's harmful for you. So the halachic ramifications, it's not even. It's for sure us. For sure us. Bleach is good for your dishes, not for you to ingest. Okay. Same thing with marijuana. It's not for you to ingest. Not through the vapors, not through inhaling it, not through eating it, not through drinking liquid or whatever the case is, right? In no way should it be okay. If you know anyone, I'm sure some of us know, please, there are people out there who can help, who want to help, and you guys can call me after this year if you guys want to take my number, or should we even say it here on YouTube? I don't know. Yeah, why not? 516-581-5859. Okay, call me 24/6. Okay, because I won't pick up on Shabbos. Okay, 516-581-5859, and call me. And if you call me anonymous, it's no problem. And we'll try our best to help you. Baruch Hashem, I've had this good to help out many people in the past, and Baruch Hashem, today they're clean. And I hope to help everybody. I hope to save the world. But it starts with one Jew at a time, or one person at a time. And it shall help us to be strong and to live life to our fullest potential.
Thank you. Zakuru. Rabbi, will you return back to one of coconut or she was over. Thanks. You part of it? Okay.
Yeah, yours good in front of the screen so people will know how to use it.
I think less if we put it on the screen. We can, but it's just going to be longer. So we're not good at that.
No, they could get it from somewhere else, and at least they'll know how to administer it.
We can. I mean,
Okay. So we have over here Narcans in the box over here, right? Where were the Narcans?
Over there.
We have some Narcans, and Narcans are used for anyone who is in the middle of overdosing with opiate, things like that. And you take it and just spray it into their nose, into each nostril, and it makes them go from overdosing to withdrawal instantly, and you can save a life very, very easily. Hmm? Not alcohol. No. Yeah, no, opiate. Yeah, with opiate use. So today with fentanyl everywhere, this fentanyl, it's everywhere. Yeah, you're right, 100% true. The smallest amount. Yeah. It'll help. I have a guy who lives in my shul. Is it still filming?
It's filming. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not gonna tell you where my shul is. But actually no. It's some okay. Don't can you not post this part?
Okay, let me turn it off.
Yeah.
It's a short album. So
And then you're busy. So around 6 months ago, around 6 months ago, one of